Right, don't get too scared by what looks very complicated, because this is as complicated as it's going to get, and I'm going to show you around everything. So if I zoom in quickly, this is just a canvas inside of Obsidian, and what you can see here is 9 cards. This is a 3x3 grid. On the left, I have the ecological dynamics group, which is in green, the work process group, which is in orange, and other interest group in red, the colors representing priority. And then going down, I have the first row, which is green, the next one orange, the next one red, again representing priority. So the top left is green, green, which is the highest of priority. Then I've got green, orange, and green, orange, which is the next. Then I've got these 3, then these 2, and this one. So it goes from high priority to low priority. And this lets me see the different areas that I'm interested in alongside priority, sort of as a matrix rather than just up, down sort of priority levels. Hopefully that made sense. And then if we go into this card and zoom in a bit, you can see inside of each card there is a list of projects, and this is a data view query, a very simple one that is showing the priority of this type of project. So the essay projects are the most important for me. It's part of ecological dynamics and it's high priority because it's green, so green, green. It's also, this project is the high priority in the high priority card, hopefully that makes sense, and it's at the research status. Then I've got an interesting, curious, etc, etc. You can see the priorities and status in here, and these are files. If I go slightly to the right, you can see this is work process, and this is the course. This is all the course information, so the course lessons. You can see paid, template, plugins, the stage it's at, so I need to make a video for this one, GIFs, etc. And this again is a data view query inside of a file. You can see at the top it says query, high priority. At the top it says query dashboard, essay projects, and it's exactly the same for all of these other cards. So each file you can see shown is what I class as a project. It has a priority and a status shown in the appropriate cards. The reason status isn't shown down here because I know these are ideas, so I don't need to see the idea bit. For those of you that watch the metadata menu video, I'll leave a link at the top right. The reason ideas is showing here is because I'm testing, or I was testing, backwards and forwards between having editable data view queries using JavaScript or just the normal queries, and I've actually gone back to just using normal queries for the main reason that with JavaScript it updates, which gives you a little blip when it updates, and that flickering just became very irritating because of the amount of times I come into this dashboard. So the ideas are there because it's the old query. So if I come into this page, so I double click, it takes me directly to this heading. So video ideas heading, you can see I've got essay projects, and this is the JS query, JS query, JS query. So when I come into here, I can edit the query. I'm going to remove the status. Now the status has disappeared, and now I click on the home button inside of my ribbon, and it takes me back to that 9x9 grid with the query now being updated to just show priority. This template will be linked in the description as I sell it inside of my template pack, but if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer inside the comments. Moving over to the right side of my home dashboard, you can see I've got a card that shows ongoing research, and these are essentially areas of expertise that I'm looking to develop. So there's no end point for any of these files, and you may notice the status is a little bit different, and that's because of the icon. Again, this is referring to metadata menu, so I'll leave a link in the card at the top. This is a research file. When I click on that button, it shows me the status, the class, which is research, and priority, and when I click on the option, it shows idea, collect, and outline. These are the different statuses for research files. I'm either collecting information about it specifically for a project, or I'm outlining something again for a project. That could be a video, an essay, a podcast, or something like that. Or it's just an idea that I'm looking to explore. If I move over to the completed projects, this is just a list of completed projects to help me see that I'm actually doing something, kind of like a feel-good, yes, I'm actually being productive. The icons are slightly different, and that's because they represent the type of project they are. So this one is just a project, so when I click it, you can see it's not got a class, and this is my default class. So when I click on the option, it lets me add the class, and then I can select from any of the classes that I have inside of the query. Again, if you want more specifics, have a look at the metadata menu video, but I'm going to leave it empty because I know that this was done before I had classes in place inside of the vault. However, if I click on the video, guess what? It's a video, but the status is a list, so idea, research, script, etc. This is like the processes of me going through making a video, and that's different from if I click on the pen, which is just a blog. You can see there's not as many statuses, so depending on the type of project, we'll change the available status options. Going all the way to the left, you can see I have a source inbox, and these are source files. Again, you can also notice because of the icon, I click on the icon and it just gives me the option to add a note if I want to, because most of the time sources, I don't need information in there, and opening up the files plugin, something I very rarely do, just to show you what's going on. Every project, so video, book, essay, story, etc., everything inside of a project should be linked to sources that I'm using to obviously reference the information. And these files are automatically put inside of my sources folder. And what the data view query is doing is looking for sources that aren't linked to projects, which means this source here, which you can see there's nothing in it, isn't linked to any project. And this could be for many reasons. It might have been something to do with sync. It might have been something I stopped doing halfway through. And then of course there are some files in here where I'm not perfect and I haven't linked them to things. It's what happens. Those of you with a keen eye will probably notice that the colors of the files are actually connected to the priority. So high priority is green, interesting is a faded green, medium is a yellow, curious is orange, and then low is actually red, if I can find something that's low, like down here. And that's done through the supercharged links and the style settings plugin. You can see the priorities there are added in with the colors. The priority's been added as an attribute, and I'm also looking at the status. So some projects have a status, and I just want it to be ticked when it's done, and that shows it inside the file, which I use inside of the podcast folder. And you can see you've got John and myself. So this is a collaborative vault. 2 people are in this, editing at different times and doing their own work. And you can see we've done this podcast, etc. So I can see in the files view when I've done them or not. And there's the podcast that we're currently working on. So idea, we need to review those, and the rest is obvious. In the left ribbon, you've seen me obviously push the home button. Then I have a temp button. So when I push the temp button, it will take me to my temporary workspace. And this is the essay I'm currently working on. So you see Danny Projects Essay UK Educational System and the UK Educational System, because this is a folder. The reason I have it up twice is I wrote a first draft with some notes in the comments. So this was the script. These were some notes that were going to go on screen. I thought, you know what, I don't like this. I'm going to rewrite this. So I had a second draft up. So I was looking at the first part of the first draft, looking and then going, okay, let's rewrite this. And then I wrote it again in draft 2. Maybe 3, 4, who knows how many drafts, but this is how I'm working with the temp space. But when I start off a project, I'll actually have the background file. So this is the background research for the educational systems. And as I scroll down, you can see inside the outline, there's lots of different sections. And I'll have the background up on one side, the file up on another. Maybe I'll have a source as another tab in here. And then if I push Control S, see at the top right, it says successfully saved workspace temp. So now when I click back to home and then click on the temp, it then takes me back to that checkpoint, essentially. So I've got the background up and I've got these tabs up. So whenever I'm working, I go to the temp space, I do the work that I want to do. So let's just open this up again. And then when I get to a point of, okay, I've finished working, or my brain's going, or I need to do something else, or I need to go somewhere else, I could push Control S. It saves where I'm at. So if I have a pop-out window, like another window or more tabs, or this is closed, it just saves the workspace so I can go straight back into wherever it was that I left off. And that is done using the Commander plugin, which allows me to add these buttons to the ribbon. You can see some of the other buttons in there as well. And the Workspaces Plus plugin, which extends the core plugins workspaces and basically lets me add a hotkey to it, which is what Commander uses to actually click on the button to take you to the workspace. If you don't want them in the ribbon, you can put them in the tab bar, the status bar, editor menu, etc. There are loads of options in here. I just keep it nice and simple with icons at the side. When it comes to the organization of the ribbons, you can see this order is different from this order. When you go into the settings, appearance, and come down to manage ribbon menu, the order of these will be saved inside the workspace. So inside the home workspace, they're saved in this order. If I was to go to the temp workspace, it may be a different order. So I have a different order for each workspace. Most of them are the same, but there are some slight differences. While we're here, we've got the course workspace, which goes into essentially the home dashboard, but for the course. So if I zoom out very quickly, you can see there's all the current lessons, past lessons, future lessons, all organized so I can see what's going on. I then have the book, which I'm not going to go into, which is similar to the temp workspace, but for long form writing, which I'll leave a link in the top right for the video I did on that. I then have the sync your Kindle highlights. So if I push this button, you can see we've got 183 highlights. Let's sync now. I think I've got 3 books in Amazon, and I'm currently reading one at the moment on Kindle. So 1, 2, and then there you go. And then that 183 is going to change maybe? Yeah, 209. And just as some clarification on what I was talking about, the ribbon organization, you can see fantasy is now at the top because inside of the course, I want fantasy at the top because that's typically where I go after being inside the course. So I have this customized for each workspace. But if we go back to the home, open up the sidebar, you can see the ribbons is already selected because that's what I have pre-selected inside of the home workspace. We've got highlights, and inside highlights are the books that I'm reading. So this one is on Kindle. This one is actually a physical book I'm reading. So if I click into there, all of the highlights that have just been synced are now inside of this page. So if we scroll all the way down, it'll actually get to the highlights I was at. And once I finish reading the book, I will then put these highlights into practice. So at the moment, this is just a source that hasn't been used in a project. The Publish Changes button is Obsidian Publish, so you can see all of my notes on side of Obsidian Publish. I'll leave a link in the description for that. Then I have John's home, so I can see what John is up to. So it's essentially his version of my dashboard. I'm not going to go to that because obviously that's his. And then I have a plus button for Zotero. So all of my sources here are inside of Zotero, which is why you've got the @ symbol next to them all. Giving you a very quick look into my Zotero, you can see I've got lots of collections and sub-collections relating to projects. I've got a couple of groups that I'm in as well for other people's research, and each item inside of my Zotero has different statuses, similar to my Obsidian, has different priorities, again similar to my Obsidian, and all of the ones with this note tag, when I right-click, you can see Open Markdown Note, and it will open up my Obsidian to that note. So here's the notes that I took on that item from Zotero, so it's directly linked, which I've done a video on. Again, I'll link it top right. The reason I have the canvases inside of the bookmarks as well as on the ribbon is if, for example, I'm inside of my temp workspace and I'm working. I forgot to save the workspace, so I'm going to exit that. I'm going to push Shift and right arrow to open it up on the other side, get rid of that, Control S. Now save the temp workspace. So now I'm in here. If I want to have a quick look at some projects, I've come up with a thought or an idea, it's like, oh, I need to check that quickly. I can add a new tab, open up the side, click on home. I can then go into wherever I want to inside of the home dashboard, click out, and it saves me time rather than going and opening up the home workspace and then going back to the temp workspace. It's just a bookmark, so it's quicker. Speaking of making things quicker, making a project could be a little bit of a hassle, but I have templates in place, and I use this plus button at the top to add a project, which gives me a drop-down list of all the types of projects. Most of these are the same. They're a template choice, except from these bottom two. So if I click on book, I then get different parts of the book, so different template parts of the book for, you can see down here, world building. Click on back, I go to course. Again, I've got the lesson or the plugin option. And then essay project is also a little different. So going into the quick add settings, which is the plugin that I'm using here, we've got all of these different choices. We've got the multi options, which is essentially a folder inside of quick add to give me template options. But the essay project, if I go to the settings, you can see is actually a macro. So when I go to the settings of the macro, I have two different quick adds inside of this essay project. So one of them is essay, which is using the essay template file, creating a file with that template, and it's saving it in the Annie folder, projects folder, essays folder, and then it's asking for the name value and the name value. So the folder is going to have the same name as the file. It then waits for 50 milliseconds and then does this next one, which uses the background template and then saves it in the Danny, projects, essays, and name value. So the same folder as the first file, but it's called background. So what that looks like in practice is when I push the plus button, say essay project, type in example because that's the name value. What I actually pay attention to is inside the essay projects, the example file is showing. So I can now see that project inside of here, which is when I will then add the priority and the status because I don't know what it's going to be when I'm making the essay. So I make the essay idea, it comes in here, I'm like, okay, what is it going to be? But on the back end, what it's done is it's created an example folder inside the essays folder, projects folder, and Danny folder, because that's the name value that I gave it. And inside of that folder, I've got a background file and an example file. Then when I click inside of the example file, I have a link to the background that's related to this project. You can see inside of the folder, and that's done through Templater. Going into source mode quickly so you can see everything that's going on. You can see I've got this inside of Templater. It just brings in the file title. So the name value that I had in the quick add is then brought in for the file title, and then the rest of it is just a path with a link. Heading into the background file of the UK educational system research that I've been doing previously, as I scroll down, you can see there's footnotes in here. And I use a lot of footnotes because as you can see, I use a lot of sources. I think there's about 20 in here. So I've just gone into the reading view and then I've clicked on references and I've come all the way down the bottom and I can see, okay, these are all the sources which linked in Obsidian, and these arrows take me to where I've cited them. So if I click on the arrow, it takes me up to that place, click on the link, and it takes me back down. But while I'm writing, there are a couple of things that I use. I shared about the long form writing, which I'll link again at the top right. But when I'm just doing writing inside of research files, you'll notice there's a little bit of a difference with the red underline, and there's actually a yellow underline as well. So when I click on this, it gives me suggestions, which is different from the core spell checker in Obsidian. When I click on the isbit, this is a grammar checker. So if I click on is, it then corrects it. This is also incorrect. It should be a capital I because it's after a full stop. And this is the language tool integration plugin. I haven't really changed any of the settings in here. I've just turned on the picky mode, and essentially it's Grammarly, but a different version of Grammarly. And I actually prefer this to the Grammarly plugins for Obsidian. I'm going to remove this line because it wasn't there. But when I'm writing, it's helpful for me to just write and then, oh yeah, I missed a capital, or that doesn't make sense. And that tool does it for me, as you would expect grammar checkers to do anyway. But when it comes to the footnotes, I have a footnotes shortcut plugin, which is this one right here. And when I push the hotkey that I've selected, it takes me all the way down, takes the cursor down to where that footnote is. And then when I'm inside the footnote down in the references, I push the hotkey, it takes me back to that location. And then when I want to add a footnote, so if I wanted to add another source here, for example, I push the hotkey, and because it was an empty line, it's actually added a number at the bottom. So now I'm source 25, so thing. It takes me back to where it was, and you can see it's added that footnote in there. So it's a quick and easy way to add footnotes. I'm going to remove that because I don't want it, go down to references, and then delete that line because I don't want it. That's my vault in a nutshell. You can see this is my entire vault. All the hotkeys are saved, all the settings are saved, everything's saved. The only difference is if I open up the folders, you've got the classes in there, you've got the projects and stuff that's all empty. So the folders are still there, the quick adds are still there, but you don't have any of my files. You can see those on publish, but this is what's inside the template. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below.